everyone, and welcome to the Travel Collective. Tonight in our destination series, I think this is the third series we're doing, we're going to listen to Russell talk about Spain. So I'll let you take it away, April.
Great. Thanks, Cindy. And thanks for joining us, Russell. I really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. So today we have USA Today's best-selling sci-fi fantasy author, Russell. And he also has a book, oddly enough, that's also called How to Build Your Creative Career. So I'm super excited. He's taking us to Spain. So go ahead and take it away, Russell, and tell us, why Spain? What was the choice and the destination? And
Well, as we were talking about a little beforehand, me and my wife my wife is a big traveler. I'm not a big traveler, but my wife is big on traveling, and so she kind of put the travel bug in me that we're gonna go somewhere once a year at least. So
good.
We've been together since 2004. We were out here in 2008, and I'd been to Denmark to shoot a movie before, but I wasn't a big traveler. So we started with stuff in America. We went to places in Southern California, obviously, because we had just moved there, and we kind of worked our way to. Our friend had a wedding in Taiwan, so we did Taiwan, Japan, and Thailand. And then a couple of years later, we worked our way up to Peru. And not that they're all amazing trips. It's just there's budget concerns. And so we then were able to, we were a little more stable with each trip. So we could go to a little bit more expensive places. And 2018, we chose Spain for a couple of reasons. First, I had a book that was set in Spain. So it's sort of a dystopian alternate history book that called The Marked Ones, which we're launching right now on Kickstarter. Secondarily, my mother was a Spanish teacher for about 40 years. And so she told great stories about Spain, and she went to Spain several times, and she always made it seem so wonderful. And then third, I edited and contributed to a book called Monsters and Other Scary. There's a bad word that starts with an S at the last word in that. One of the contributors put together a book tour for us in Spain. So we were able to do some signings around Spain, do my research for the book that needed to get done, satisfy an itch to get to Spain, and do it all in the auspices of my career. So we could basically wannabe press, and my authorship paid for the trip, which was awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. So how long were you able to go for then? That sounds fabulous.
It was so good. So we were there for a little over 2 weeks, and we didn't do the traditional thing. So I think most people do Madrid, Spain, and then the south of Spain, Valencia and Granada and the sort of the hot part.
Right.
We did it different. We went to Madrid, and then we went up to the Galicia area to a place called San Sebastian, which is more Michelin star restaurants per capita than anywhere else in the world.
Oh, wow.
And from there we went to Bilbao, which took us to the Guggenheim, the original Guggenheim. So if you know the Frank Gehry kind of weird design where it's sort of looks like it's out of space, maybe a hairpiece or something. And he did the Walt Disney Concert Hall. He's in a couple of other Guggenheims around the world, but the original one is in Bilbao, which is in the north of Spain. We didn't get to any of sort of the filming locations for Lord of the Rings or anything really far up, because then we went to Barcelona, and we did Barcelona, but then we also went to the Dali Museum. My wife and my favorite artist is Dali, and we went to the Picasso Museum there, and we went to Dali's a home. And we did a whole bunch of really cool stuff. And it's really interesting how Spain is set up, because sort of Madrid is this old time, it's very traditional. There's the Prado and Reina Sofia and the Royal Palace, and it's very sort of ornate, old school. But Barcelona hates Spain. Like Barcelona
Oh.
wants to be its own separate country, and so everything in Barcelona is kind of and even like Dali and Picasso and all of these artists who like were in Barcelona, their work is really a condemnation, a satirical like subversion of a lot of the stuff you saw in Madrid. So I really recommend if you go there, go to Madrid first. I'm not a big fan of like traditional artwork, like romantic art or impressionist art. I find it quite boring, but I do like El Bosco and a couple of other ones who are like very off the wall, and some of the more modern art is also quite nice. But Barcelona is great because their whole ethos is like screw Spain, and so their art is very much like one of the most popular paintings of Picasso, for instance, is a study on one of Degas' most popular paintings, and it like shows how he manipulated it in like dozens of ways. If you go to the Dali Museum, there is a ceiling in this very ornate room that like has very large feet, and it's supposed to be about Dali and his wife sort of meeting in heaven. But you wouldn't know, but like you have to know that there was an artist in the royal palace whose thing was feet, and like that the feet looked like they moved with you. And if you knew that, it brought like a whole nother level of like understanding to like what the room was laid out in, how it was laid out. And the Dali Museum is wonderful because it was designed by Dali, like while he was alive. So you very rarely get a museum designed by the artist while they're living. It's usually done posthumously by someone in their family, or maybe on based upon plans that they put together. So this was actually like designed by Dali during his life, and so it really is like the essence of what his work is, which is like very weird. But like also, if you've been to Madrid, you really kind of see the subversion of what he was trying to do with all of the work in that like is a commentary on the traditional work that you see in the Prado and around sort of Old Town Madrid.
Right. So when you were on this tour of Spain, were you staying? Did they book the hotels? Did you guys do most of the planning as far as where you were staying? And
oh no, we do all the planning. We don't do any. We take tours in the area, like if we can't get to somewhere. So for instance, the Dali Museum was like a tour, but it was like that day we go on a tour, but usually we're on our own. And my wife does tons of research, and she has like massive amounts of plans, and every day is like booked with stuff. Like a morning thing, an afternoon thing, but we use our points kind of for travel, so that's how we use them most of the time. And usually, because I have a business that spends a lot of money, we spend a lot of money. I have a lot of points, and we use that to like buy VIP entrances, which is one of the travel tips that people do not use at like nearly enough. It is easily, aside from maybe like booking private travel or something, like a private car, the best use of money in another country is being able to get the VIP early entrance, being able to get the VIP experience so you don't wait in line. For instance, we went to the Vatican this year, and Italy this year, and there were people standing outside for like literally wrapped miles and miles and miles outside the Vatican. But we knew in advance the day we were going to go, and so we booked the VIP like months earlier, and like we walked in before anyone else was up, before anyone else was in. We got like an hour in the Vatican when like very few people were in there. And yes, it cost considerably more, but I would much rather spend that money there than wait in line to try and get an entrance when millions of people are there.
Right, right. Yeah, that's great tips. So were you meeting with locals? Did you eat with locals during the time that you spent in Spain?
Oh yeah, so we my mother had a friend in Spain, who she'd known for her whole life, and he drove up from Valencia, which is a 4-hour drive. Drove both ways to spend one day with us to hang out.
Oh wow.
So he took us out to a bunch of stuff outside the city, about an hour outside the city, an old monastery where it was really cool because there was like the way that Spain worked is it kind of was like a battle between the King of France and the King of Germany. And so like they both had these areas of the castle. So you saw like this ornate, like French style, and then this very minimalistic Bavarian style in the same castle. And then we went to, I don't know if I should talk about this because like it's so controversial in Spain, but like we went to Franco's grave, which is this massive like monument, like in like the sort of center of Spain. But like you do not, if you ever go to Franco, and it's beautiful, and like I used it as this one, like it's a huge part of the marked ones, because it's this sort of, they kind of bored into a mountain, and this massive, maybe like 100 feet bore through this mountain that, and then there's like an altar, and there's like these like beautiful like candelabras all over the place, but it's basically like the side of this mountain, and it became like one of the most important scenes of the whole of the locations in the whole book was influenced by this. But yeah, you do not talk about going to Franco's grave or Franco's tomb in Spanish company, because they, like, Franco is he was the longest running fascist dictator, because he didn't die until the 70s. So he was in power from the 40s to the 70s. And part of that is a huge part of the marked ones as well. So getting to be over there and seeing all of that and hearing stories from him, from my friend who was in the army at that time, was really impactful. And he took us out to food, and he like showed us all like the local stuff that we didn't necessarily know about or we were on the fence about. And then the book tour, my friend met us in Madrid for a day to do the book tour, and he took us around. And then he met us in Barcelona as well for a night at the end of the trip, and took us around there as we were doing, so yeah, we got some local stuff, and then we did a lot of stuff on our own. Spain's great because you can talk as much Spanish as you want. I'm very bad at Spanish, but I try. My wife is a little bit better at Spanish, but they also are very accommodating to tourists. So they will speak English to you if you do not know Spanish.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah. So what are were there any special items you would suggest packing for this destination? Are there certain times a year that are better to go to Spain than others?
Well, we went in March. I don't know if there's any special things that you should do. I 100% recommend going to San Sebastian, though, because San Sebastian is like the best food I've ever had, and probably the only place outside of America that I would like go live tomorrow.
Oh, really?
Because it's, you'd have to pack a charger that like works, but like that's anywhere you go. They were like Spain as part of the EU and America's relationship with Spain. It was very I didn't find like when I went to Peru and you had to bring your own toilet paper, and that was like really, really, really important that you brought your own toilet paper. I don't think there was anything specific, hiking boots and like. And I actually make a habit of buying, I have a whole set of clothes that is just for travel. And they are moisture wicking pants meant for travel that are nice, moisture wicking shirts. So I can bring like 3 shirts and like 2 pairs of pants and last for weeks.
Oh,
and
wow.
I literally travel with just a backpack. It's a bigger backpack. It's a backpack that like has roughly the same size as a carry-on, but really not anywhere near the amount of a carry-on. And I literally bring my computer and chargers, and everything that I bring for a trip fits in that little book bag.
That's amazing. That's the way to go. I like. We should all aspire to that.
Well, yeah, it comes from our we went to Costa Rica, and like we brought tons of stuff, and then we went to Japan and we brought just carry-ons. But having the carry-on, I did not like bringing it down the cobblestone street, and I did not like having to stow it up. So like I literally just bring the one bag, and it fits underneath my seat if I needed to. We like to get bulkhead seating, so it fits like right up in the tiny bulkhead part of that. So yeah, I highly recommend if you can go with just the carry-on. And it wasn't really possible before without doing washing a lot of times, but they make so much moisture wicking stuff like 32 Below and Mizent and Maine, and there's a couple of other places that like do really nice. And you can they do sort of a like I like to bring a pair of black and a pair of khakis, and then and the nice thing is the khakis look like just regular khakis, but like they have a bunch of zippers everywhere, so like it like helps it protects your stuff. And then I have like 2 black shirts, 1 white shirt, and 1 like polo, and that pretty much gets you everything you need unless you're going to like a wedding. And I've done that before, and it is like not like that is when you need a different plan, because you have to bring the whole suit.
Right, exactly. So tell us a little bit about some of you've mentioned a lot of amazing places, but were there specific places that surprised you about Spain that you weren't expecting, that maybe you discovered on your travels or through some of the locals that showed you around?
Yeah, so the biggest surprise was San Sebastian and Bilbao, honestly. Like I did not think my wife was very excited for it. But you know, you never hear about the north of Spain, really. You always hear about the south of Spain, of the Alhambra, and you hear of all of these like beautiful places in the south and the beaches, and that's sort of what Spain is known for. But I really was very surprised and taken with the north of Spain. We took a trip to we took a train, took about 4 hours. So I was writing on the train and like taking notes on the train as we like drove up. And then the city of San Sebastian is just so beautiful and like quaint, and like every place is like the most amazing food, like tapas, but like the most amazing tapas ever. And I went to this place. My favorite meal in the world is this place called El Fuego Negro, which is in San Sebastian. And you wouldn't know it going in because it's like just kind of a bar. It's like a bar. Like it looks. But they have this tasting menu, and you have to get the tasting menu, because if you just the way that they lay out the food is much different than just ordering the tapas at the bar. But they do this wine pairing with a sort of tapas thing, and just everything is so like perfect in a way that I've never ever had before. But it's so weird because there are these puppets on the wall that have genitalia, and it's kind of this like punk rocky like dive bar aesthetic. But it was just the most amazing food I've ever had. We also had a great meal in Spain, in Madrid, which I highly recommend. Every time I tell people about it, they've been to Spain, they regret not getting it. It's called Cocina Madrilena. It is like a beef stew, but it's like tons of sides, and like literally we got like 1 helping, and it was enough to feed 6 people. So I highly recommend like that thing that we found. I was not a fan of the Prado, but I did like, they have an alternative sort of museum of more modern art. I think it's the Reina Sofia, which is lovely in Madrid. The thing that I'm very happy that we did first was go to Madrid. We did all of like the touristy stuff in Madrid, and like it's boring. Like going to the Royal Palace is like boring. Like any palace, like boring. It's like boring. It's like okay, this is a palace. I've seen a million palaces before. Oh look, there's another painting of like whatever. Some like some like king and like cool. But then going to Barcelona at the end, and you really just see the like how different it is. I think that the best meal that we had in Barcelona was a place called the F word-ing restaurant. It was amazing. It wasn't quite the level of El Fuego Negro, but you could tell, like, if we went back in 5 years, I think that it would be a Michelin star restaurant because it was like below like the same tasting menu. We don't do tasting menus often, but I highly recommend it in Spain because it's tapas, and tapas is kind of the thing in Spain. I will say that if you want paella, do paella in Madrid. They don't really do that in other places. They do sangria everywhere, which we drank constantly. And the real nice thing, the reason I think it's my favorite, is you could just walk around and walk in anywhere if you were hungry or tired and get a quick drink and get a quick bite anywhere. Mm-hmm. So like we didn't find any like holes in the wall that like people told us about really. We just like by walking around, you just are like, hey, are you hungry? Yeah, I could have a couple of tapas. And you walk in and like 10 minutes later, you like are done, or 15 minutes later, and it's good food. It's like really like excellent food. And I've been all over this world and I've never had an experience like that where you could just be like, God, I'm hungry. Hey, let's just go in there. It'll take us 15 minutes and we can just stand at the bar, have a sangria, and then keep on our way. And that was, to me, that was the most amazing part of Spain, just having that experience. So I guess I wouldn't do it until like coronavirus is like done, because you really, the experience of like going in and all the tapas is there, and it's very quick because the tapas are already made. So like you don't have to wait for it to be made. You just like literally go in and say, those 3 things look good. Give me those 3 things and a sangria, and then you drink and you're done. So yeah, those are some of the, I don't know, I think I just rehashed all of the old like things, of great things that I said about it before, but those were the real like stars. I'm gonna, like, if someone from Spain listens to this, they're gonna get really pissed because like I really liked Franco's tomb. I thought it was like such an interesting piece of architecture and like such an interesting like study of the man himself, and who was like a horrible man, and like he made this very opulent, ornate hole in a cave, and like, you know, it just showed how kind of arrogant he was, because like who just bores like 100-foot like diameter like bore into a friggin' cave, and it's like only like one of the most like absolutely like most arrogant humans who's ever existed would do that. And seeing it was interesting, knowing the history is interesting. Talking about it to Spanish people though, not recommended.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you mentioned all these fabulous cities and places, and going in March, do you kind of feel like you missed like the bulk of all the, you know, high season quote of tourism and stuff? Because it would be nice to explore these places when it's more the locals and just not, you know, wall to wall. Some cities that are well known, you know, you just feel like I see all Americans here. I don't see the locals. So
yeah, you know, I didn't even talk about Toledo, which was awesome. But yes, being able to explore the back cities when it was off season, or at least gap season, like everything was about 50% cheaper. We went to Italy this year, and it was like bananas expensive because like we went in June and not in March. Plus, it was hotter than it was in Spain. Is quite hot. So by going in the off season, like it was quite a bit cooler. The downside, just like any other thing, is like there's more potential for rain. But like we were quite lucky, knock on wood, that we're usually semi-lucky. That's why I knock on wood. Not that we can, not that it could like ruin a previous vacation, but that like it continues, because we have like pretty generally good luck when it comes to like the weather when we go places.
Oh, that's wonderful. So did you have any travel mishaps while you were on this trip that you care to share, or something, a lesson learned story?
Yes. So we were going. We generally were on time, but one day I decided to eat. We were going up to this monastery, which was very far away from Madrid, I think. Pretty sure it was Madrid. And you had to take a train, and the train only went every like 30 minutes. I decided I wanted to take 10 more minutes for my food. And in doing that, like, it ruined the whole morning because my wife was like, we missed the train, and then my wife was pissed, and like until we actually got on the train and there, and it was fine once we got there because like, how long does it take? Like, you can take as long as you want to see a monastery, and frankly,
Right.
like after an hour, I was like, all right, cool, I've seen this monastery. It was the monastery where the it was like the one of the Virgin Marys, like one of the really famous Virgin Marys, like exist, who's like who's black, like a Black Virgin Mary who like turned I don't know. So like anyway, that's where we went to that day. But like, we stood in line to see it. We saw it. It was very cool. And then we left. And what's nice about like how we travel is we looked in and we saw the line, and we're like, she's like, do you need to get any closer than this? And I was like, no, I've seen a statue before. We just like,
Right.
And so we were able to see all the cool parts of the monastery, and we had to like basically cut an hour off of that time, but for us it was fine. And otherwise we had a pretty good experience because we try to have a list of like 100 things that we can do, but knowing that we're only going to get one done in the morning and one in the afternoon. I have an autoimmune disease, so I can't do as much as I would like, which means that I like can't really push myself. And by about 4 o'clock, I'm gassed and I need to go back and like lay down before we go to dinner. So, that was the only one that I distinctly remember. I'm sure if I asked Karen, she would know a little bit more of the mishaps, but the only one that I can remember is that one where like we were late to a train, but it ended up working out fine. Like, just an hour later than we thought.
That's wonderful. I mean, that it always kind of works out, in the end, and to have that attitude, I think, is important when you're traveling, definitely. So give us a little teaser. I know you are as an author, and you mentioned your wife does like a lot of the planning. Did she know kind of the angle that you were looking for when you went? Were there certain places that you already had pre-planned, or you took what you got from the trip to go into your book? Can you share a little on that? I don't want to give away your book.
So yeah, I knew most of the stuff that I needed. I knew I needed. So the idea of the book is that it takes place in a contemporary Spain, but a contemporary Spain that is run by the UK, because so it's fantasy. So it's
Right.
Imagine all of the Axis powers were run by magic users, and they rose up because humanity was using technology, and the technology kept getting better and better and better and better and better. So they knew that like they would basically be like they'd already been like kicked out of doing like electricity and all sorts of other stuff, and so they knew that like it was just a matter of time before like they didn't have the numbers to fight humanity. So they went and they fought humanity because they believed that they were superior. So same general spirit of that like superiority fascism, and then humanity rose up and fought them back, and all of the Axis powers like died, and similarly to how it worked in our history, and the same. And Franco, however, held out for 30 additional years, just like he did, and then he died.
Right.
And so when he died, the UK basically like took over Spain, renamed all of the major monuments, and subjugated magic users. So in other countries, it was very easy to see magic users were that magic users were which magic users were on like Hitler's side and which ones were not, because it ended very quickly. But because of how the war worked in Spain, there was a lot of guerrilla tactics, and people, you never knew who was on the good side and who was like on the Allied side and Axis side, and who was like working for Franco and against them. It basically said after the war that like all magic users in Spain are like subjugated. They're in ghettos. They like are enemies of the state, basically. And they didn't arrest them all, but they basically put them in ghettos and made them second-class citizens. And so if you get magic, you are basically like you lead a cursed life. And in this world, the main character learns that she has magic, and she has to escape to the city of Toledo. So the Toledo is sort of the last bastion for magic users, but it hasn't been seen in decades. And so I knew I needed a bunch of information on Madrid. Knew I needed a bunch of information on Toledo. And then I kind of could figure out where Toledo was in relation to the world based on San Sebastian. I could find out some of the parts. There's not really that much on Barcelona. I would have loved to include more. If I ever do a second book in that universe, I'll include more on Barcelona. But there was a lot of sort of that kind of punk rock aesthetic, which Spain, I love Spanish art because it has this kind of punk rock aesthetic. And so, yeah, I knew kind of that I needed those two, and I needed to have this kind of like idea of how the rebels worked, and how Spain after World War II was different from the other Axis powers. But then we kind of molded the rest of the story around what I saw. So there was a lot of like them traveling around the country to Toledo and to find it. And I used a lot of the stops that we made along the way to do that. I used a lot of the interactions that I had with locals to sort of mold the way the conversations worked. And then I used a lot of the history, because stuff has been renamed. So like the Prado is no longer the Prado, and the Royal Palace was not the Royal, like all of these things were named different stuff. And so I also wanted to like talk to locals about, how they felt about this. It's like weird relationship that they have with their history, because, there's Moors that came in, there's Gauls that came in, they were fascist for a long while. Like there's just all of this stuff, like, and they have this they were all of these kind of principalities, Valencia, and then Catalan and Castillon and Castillo, and all of these areas were different disparate regions, and they all kind of hate each other, but they're all also like the same country. And so all of that stuff really worked to sort of foment the idea of how I was going to tackle this book. But it wasn't until I really got there and started to think about it and see pictures, and I've got hundreds, thousands of pictures about Toledo. And I was Toledo, we spend a lot of time in the book, not to ruin it for you, but like, and so I really like took everything in Toledo and like is very much laid out in the way that like Toledo is laid out, because it's a very specific city. It's built around there's a wall surrounding it. It's basically on an island by itself, pretty much, with like a couple of little inlets in, and like it's built up into like on like a hill. And it's just like the city goes sort of, and so you can't really fake that. It's a very, very specific aesthetic. And the same thing with Madrid. It's very specific with Plaza Mayor, or with the Playa Mayor, and how all of how the old area of the city moves compared to the new areas of the city. And so I wanted to, it took a lot of time to get that right. And, all of those pictures, some of which I sent you, really helped me nail down what I wanted to do. But yeah, if you read the book, the parts that are in Toledo are as accurate as I could make them to reality, because while Spain was sort of taken over by the UK, Toledo stayed its own thing,
Right.
but with magic.
Right. Wow, fabulous. So, last question. Would you go back to Spain? And if you did, what area would you focus on? An area, or it would be worth, I mean, it just sounds like there's weeks worth of places to see and things to eat and experience from just the 2 weeks you had. I think it could have been expanded into something bigger.
Yeah, I would have liked to go to the south of Spain. That's what I would do if I went back. I'd probably go to San Sebastian again because I love it so much. And if I could, I don't know if I could fit that in, but I would definitely go to the south of Spain, Valencia and Silla de Alhambra, probably jump across and go to Morocco as well, in Africa as well, because you can do that relatively easily. It's a day trip or an overnight trip to do that. That was the thing we wanted to do that we didn't get to, was sort of the south of Spain.
Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Russell, for sharing with us about your book, about Spain, and just your travels. It sounds fascinating. So I hope people will grab your book and take a read. And thank you so much for sharing. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.